All right. Well, thank you so much for joining tonight. I am Jeff Demansky, and I am the Executive Director of Hudson Valley Energy, and that's a nonprofit based here in the Hudson Valley, and that's the logo down here in the lower right corner, next to the logo for Jewel Community Power, which is an administrator of the program that we're going to talk about tonight. It's one of four that I know of approved administrators in New York State that the Public Service Commission approved to be the administrator for something called community choice aggregation, which is, with our focus, a clean energy program for communities. And I'll explain the whole background on where this came from and how long it's been around in New York State. And all the communities shown here, including Gardiner and Nelsonville and the town of Rhinebeck and the village of Saugerties, have all taken the steps to move down the road for exploring whether this makes sense for their community as a benefit for the residents, for the community members within their municipal borders. And the steps they've taken is by requirement, by state requirement, they've all passed a local law to give them the power to do this. And they have chosen Jewel to be the administrator, to guide them through the process and the exploration to see whether this makes sense. And so I'll talk about what that policy is in detail, but I will also say that this option right before these communities right now is to join a partnership with other communities as well. And the name of that partnership is the name at the top of the slide, Hudson Valley Community Power. And that is the partnership led by Jewel as the administrator, with my nonprofit, Hudson Valley Energy, as the program organizer, and the communities that are all in that same boat. And we actually have 10 other communities here in the Hudson Valley that are in the partnership and in live programs right now. Matter of fact, most of these have been in this community energy program that we're talking about for clean energy choice since 2019. And the 9 of them here have renewed into a new contract that started in 2021. And I won't go into details about the names, but I think you can see some of the names of those communities. And what we're talking about is the addition of potentially of the 4 communities I mentioned before, considering joining this partnership, Hudson Valley Community Power, for a specifically program called Community Choice Aggregation. And I will explain tonight what is Community Choice Aggregation in some detail and where it came from. And we'll focus on what are the potential benefits for the communities should they decide to move forward. And you think you might have noted that I'm saying exploration and considering and might. It is very much not set in stone yet that the communities are launching this program. There are steps ahead to make sure that it makes sense. And the community leaders are very mindful to make sure that this is something that would be very beneficial to the community members in a number of ways. There are a number of overlapping benefits. And when I talk about benefits, you'll hear me say probably a number of times that it's a win-win-win scenario. And that is in terms of potential cost savings, and while also promoting renewable power production in New York State in a way that has a number of consumer protection benefits built into it. The reason it was enabled by the state is not least for that third reason, to protect consumers from bad experiences they've had in the third-party marketplace for electricity supply, which is what we're talking about. So after explaining the benefits, we'll talk about what the pathway looks like for the communities that are considering joining, including a focus on, will the program affect me? Will I be included automatically? What choices will I have? What actions will I need to take? And on the perspective of what I think is very useful, I describe the program through the main interface that people see it through, the Central Hudson Bill. I can show you what a Central Hudson Bill looks like without the program and with the program, and emphasize that all of this does happen through the Central Hudson Bill. This is a community energy program, and even though it's a program by which the community leaders are making a decision to create a new decision option for the community members. It does not displace at all the role that Central Hudson plays since the late 1990s, what their defined role is by the state. So there's no impact in terms of reliability or who takes care of storm damage or who does the billing. Then, with an understanding of the potential benefits and who would have to make decisions, I'll talk about the next steps for the communities in this exploration, with the assumption at that point, I think, that we're moving ahead. And then to revisit my points I've talked about, I'll talk through some frequently asked questions. I have a few slides of that, but I certainly will leave time for questions as well. And I do encourage folks to use the chat window if they have questions, or to raise hands if they have some clarification that they'd like to have made. And but do please keep yourself muted, and we don't need videos until the end. So just typical Zoom etiquette. We'll keep that through the presentation. All right, so now stepping forward, jumping into what is community choice aggregation. And I'll talk about the phrase on the left before I talk about the bullets on the right. So in a nutshell, what community choice aggregation is, it's where communities aggregate together, they join together, that's what the aggregation means, for choice. And the Jewel team, we like to talk about it being a community choice program for energy, just to try to clarify what is happening. That is a clean energy program. But again, it's communities aggregating to offer a new choice, and our focus, despite what we could do with this, is on electricity supply, and it is as a way for what we really try to prioritize as a way to have a win-win-win scenario where we can offer a new choice that's very cost effective, and counter to what people think, it can offer a less expensive rate for 100% renewable production sources from New York State compared to what people would pay for non-renewable power. And it is certainly something that's better than what they could get on their own as an individual customer for electricity supply. It's worth noting at this point in time too, that this idea of the community acting on behalf of their community members is based on the existing marketplace that every utility customer has available to them in terms of electricity supply choice. Since the late 1990s, when New York State, along with a number of other states in the US, deregulated the energy markets, what that means for the emphasis of tonight is that the utility companies in New York were just converted into energy delivery companies. To use an analogy, the utilities like Con Ed and Central Hudson and Orange and Rockland, they became like UPS or FedEx or the Postal Service. Those are organizations that, as you know, don't make the packages that they deliver. They get paid or earn money or are supported by someone in terms of the Postal Service to reliably deliver those packages that somebody else makes. And so that is a perfect analogy for what happens here in New York State. And it's kind of surprising to some people. People think about the utility company as being everything from power production to the delivery and billing and storm repair service, but that's not the case. So Central Hudson is not allowed, except for a very, very, very small percentage of the power production, it's not allowed to produce power. And it's not allowed to make money on the supply decision. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of supply. But there is a private marketplace because of deregulation of companies that own the power production and companies that serve as middlemen that make it accessible to utility customers if they want to make a different choice than what the state has mandated as the default. Deregulation, when those companies were turned into delivery companies, they had to, even though a marketplace was created by which people could go out and enter into a contract with a private company for supply decision making, they had to have a default decision for people who didn't want to or just didn't make a decision around supply. And so there is an existing default or an existing opt-out program, which which the state mandated, whereby if somebody does not take advantage of that supply marketplace that was created by deregulation, then the state mandates that the local utility company play that role. But they're not allowed to make money on that decision. And it turns out most people in a region in the utility territory are in that opt-out condition, or in that original default condition. What is happening here is that countering what's happened over the last decades, the state in 2016 allowed municipalities, cities and towns and villages to play a role on behalf of their community members, both to counter some bad experiences, to make a very simple offer to community members, and to build upon the power of numbers to have leverage in the marketplace to result in that win-win scenario. In a nutshell, aggregating together, the communities can have leverage in the marketplace and negotiate a fixed rate that is for 100% renewable supply. That is an extremely good rate, and offer that on an opt-out basis as a new default to their community members. Okay, so just to walk through, revisit what I talked about and with the bullets. This is an energy purchase program that was authorized by the Public Service Commission in 2016. And that's when they gave the ability for communities to play this role. To do so, they have to pass a local law. They have to take advantage of home rule to do so. And it allows those municipalities, by joining together, or if they're big enough, they can do it by themselves. Like a city like Rochester has done this, but they are able to have leverage in the marketplace, aggregating demand to negotiate a bulk purchase of electricity supply. And in the third bullet, what we're doing is we're shifting the selection of the default, the supplier, from the original default condition, where the state makes that decision, saying that the utility will make that decision for the customers who don't make that private market choice, to a decision that the local municipality has made in partnership with other municipalities. Everyone in that, the last bullet, everyone in that condition is eligible to participate, or actually everyone in the community is eligible to participate, but those who are in the original default condition, the original opt-out, are automatically included. So it's a change from one default, one opt-out condition, to a new opt-out condition, the one established by this community choice aggregation program. And being an opt-out, everyone's automatically included, but they have to say if they don't want to be, but anybody can do so at any time. No one in the community is in a contract. There's no restrictions and there's no funny business. It's structured to be very transparent, which is another aspect of the community, the consumer protection aspect of the program. So that's what it is in detail. Revisiting what we're talking about again, let me just be clear on what we're talking about with electricity supply. And how is that measured? And this is leading up to how we'll see it on the utility bill. And I'll show you specifically an exact version of my utility bill in Central Hudson Territory. So we're talking about electricity supply, which on the utility bill is measured in some dollars per kilowatt hour or cents per kilowatt hour. It's a rate. It's the rate that is multiplied as cents per kilowatt hour or dollars per kilowatt hour against the number of kilowatt hours that a customer uses in a particular month. And when that rate is multiplied by the total kilowatt hour usage, you have a dollar outcome. And that is the cost of supply. So that's what we're talking about. This chart on the right is a simplified version of the comparison of what happens between the original default and what we're offering if the program launches as a new default. Under the original default situation, where the utility makes the decision for customers, that's represented by the red dotted line, which bounces up and down. And that is an accurate representation of what the supply decision looks like from month to month. The utility company is not allowed by state mandate to fix a rate. It can't forward bid to fix a rate. It buys on the open marketplace, and it's averaged monthly for every customer within the territory, and it varies from one month to next. So that's what the bouncing red line means. What is offered in a community choice aggregation program is a fixed rate, and that's represented by the flat green line. So we seek to get a very competitive rate for electricity supply, again, focusing on renewables. And it's a flat line. And so these typically are multi-year contracts that the municipality enters into on behalf of their community members. And it's the same rate every single month. So there's cost certainty. There's rate certainty for the duration of the program. This is a good depiction too, that this is a cost competitive rate. It's a very good rate. It's a rate that, very likely, in the way we'll structure it, if we proceed, that will be better than the utility rate in some months. And really the most important months, the months where a lot of energy use happens. So that's when, just on a supply and demand law, that's when usage goes up, and that's tends to be when the market rate goes up for electricity. And that's when those rates tend to be higher, as well as the usage. So not only is the rate higher, but the amount of usage is higher. So the benefit of being in a fixed rate that's lower is significant. But in the shoulder seasons in particular, the utility rate can be lower than the program rate. So it's not necessarily always, the fixed rate is not always necessarily going to be better than the utility rate, but averaged out over the life of the program, there is the anticipation that this will be significantly advantageous for the community members. So that's what we're talking about in terms of utility rate. So now, as promised, diving into the view through a Central Hudson bill. And I found in conversations with community members that this is a really helpful tour to understand what is actually in the Central Hudson bill and how it is multiple bills in one. So there's actually 3 sections of this one page of my Central Hudson bill. And we get to reemphasize some of the points that I made by talking through the sections. The top section in this top red box is the electricity delivery section, which is, to counter it, it's not the supply charges section. So there is delivery and there's supply. And if you remember what I said in the beginning, utility companies in New York are delivery companies. They can only make money. This is where they make revenue, for delivering the product that somebody else makes. So all of these line items in here are the line items that pay for those delivery services, which includes the basic service charge, which in essence they say is sort of like just having a meter on your property to measure your usage. That's sort of the basic service charge, and pays for the billing service that they provide. And then there are a number of line items that cover all of the rest of delivery, including the maintenance of the infrastructure, the power lines and towers, the trucks to do repair, the billing service, the customer service people at Central Hudson. All of that is included in delivery services. And for better or for worse, that is what they have total control over. There's no change to delivery if this program launches or if it does not. That is Central Hudson section. It is unaffected. And so nothing changes in terms of Central Hudson's role if a program launches. The section that does change is the supply charges section. And that's the middle section right here. And it shows here energy supply charges. And it notes, actually, based on what happened in the 1990s, Central Hudson tells us that you may choose another supplier for this part of your service. But as shown here with these 3 line items, this is an indication when there are 3 line items with these names: the MFC supply charge, the market price, and an adjustment to correct from some differences that might have happened since your billing period, since you received your bill versus what the monthly average was. The 3 lines indicate that this is the original default condition, the original opt-out, wherein Central Hudson is making your supply decision for you. So that's what it looks like. Now, looking at these columns, what are these columns? You can see that the first column, after the name description, the first column of numbers is my usage this month. In this particular usage, this month, I used 573 kilowatt hours of electricity. And every line item has that same usage. It gets multiplied on each line, 573 kilowatt hours, by this rate column. So these are all rates. There's not a label on them, but these are the dollars per kilowatt hour that are set for each of those line items. Up here in the delivery charges section is based on the agreement, what the state has approved the utility can charge for delivery, and they have to ask for permission if they ever want to change those. And down here in the supply charges, each of these, or the market, is affected by the open marketplace when the utility buys the power for the customers. So this, and so when you multiply kilowatt hours times dollars per kilowatt hour, you get just dollars. So that's what the last column is. For each line item, the total dollars, which all add up. So if you add up all the lines here, all these dollars, you get the $87.08 for delivery charges. And when you add up the rate and these three line items here, you get 62.40. Oops, you can see I kind of snapped some things together, but it's 62.45 plus the taxes to 65.45. The rate here, the total supply rate, is the sum of these three numbers right here. So if you added up these numbers shown in dollars, this comes out to just shy of about under 11 cents, but between 10 and 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's what's represented here. What is down here in the payments and adjustments section is the benefits that a customer may have if they've made a decision about solar. Whether that is solar on their home or business, actually installing solar panels, or if they are a subscriber, a virtual owner of a portion of a field of solar panels in Central Hudson Territory, which is called community solar, which I happen to be, for my house in Beacon. So you can see that there is, what you don't see down here is a rate. There's no rates down here. My community solar benefit, or the solar benefit I would derive from my solar panels generating power going into the grid, results in just a monetary benefit that is not dependent upon, oops, I actually pressed the down, is not dependent on the number of kilowatt hours I use that month. It is really just a financial transaction, a financial benefit. The reason I've emphasized this is to make a distinction between something that is often confused for people. So I've tried to explain, and I will try to reemphasize what we're talking about with supply. Again, this is the section with these line items by which with the pass-through of dollars by Central Hudson, someone pays for the actual production of electricity that goes into the grid on their behalf, that is ultimately delivered to them through the grid. The how it's made, the where it's made. This is not something that is associated with solar benefits. Even if you have solar in your home or business, it is not directly tied to how much electricity you use each month. And I can go into more detail about that if there's curiosity in the question section, but I really just want to make the distinction that solar decisions are different than your supply needs, than the benefits, or excuse me, the cost of actually using electricity at your home or business. All right, again, I'm happy to go into that more detail later, but just know that these are two separate things, which means that they're two separate ways that you can have influence on the mix of power sourcing on the New York grid. And I'll emphasize, you can mix and match. You can, they're not there. You can do both the solar decision and you can do the supply program that your municipality may launch. So what does it look like on the bill in the supply charges section if your community launches a program and you are part of it? The three line items that are here in the supply charge section become just one line item with a description of the supplier that was selected by the municipalities. So now in my supply charges section on this bill, in a month in which I use 761 kilowatt hours, I have my 761 kilowatt hours, and it gets multiplied by just this one single rate, which is the whole shebang in one single number. This is what happens in a community choice aggregation program. The municipalities together request through a competitive bid process suppliers to offer a very competitive rate for production that is based on 100% renewables in New York State. And on this bill, for Beacon's program, where I lived as part of one of the 10 communities that were part of the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership, the rate that we had for 100% renewable production from New York State sources was 6.361 cents per kilowatt hour. So that was it. And there's no registration fees, there's no monthly subscription fees, there's nothing else. This is the whole program right there in that number in the supply charges section. And the company that we picked is Direct Energy, and it said so right here. And so that is it. So my 761 kilowatt hours multiplied by this rate for every single month happens during the duration of the program for my total supply charges. And so I pay Central Hudson. Central Hudson takes the $48.41, sends it to Direct Energy, and then Direct Energy sends that to the renewable suppliers that they've engaged on behalf of our program. And during this time, it was predominantly hydropower that were the sourcing for our program. And again, you can see still the difference between the solar benefit down in this section. All right. So a little recap using a different analogy, just to redefine and reemphasize some of the things I said. This is my menu slide, like a menu in a restaurant, where when you walk into a restaurant, you have, just like on our bill, different sections where you can make a decision. So consider the electricity supply decisions that somebody has available to them to be sort of the appetizer menu on the menu. And for every customer in the state, as I emphasized right at the start of this presentation, there are two choices before a CCA program launches. They have two choices in terms of supply. They can stay with the New York State determined default, the original opt-out, where the utility company makes the decision for them. And the asterisk means that that's the original default, the original opt-out option. Or they can enter into a third-party contract with a private company, like, I put the names here, like Green Mountain Energy or Ambit or Viridian, or you name it. There's literally dozens and dozens of companies that offer these services. So private contract for a rate. People, just to revisit why people would do this, people can find better rates just for a full mix of generation sources than the utility company offers on that variation. Or people have, for example, in particular, when they enter into a contract with Green Mountain Energy, they can send their supply dollars exclusively to renewable power sources, which for the most part is and I don't think I can think of an exception, a more expensive proposition for an individual customer. So paying for renewables does tend to be more expensive still, even though there's significant changes in the marketplace in the last several years, but it still remains a premium to as an individual customer to pay for renewables. And this is, I emphasize that because that's the secret of what CCA can do, or that's the main benefit, not a secret, but that's the main benefit of what this program offers. And so if a program launches in a community, the CCA supply choice is added to the menu. Note that it does not negate the other choices. It does not take away the other choices. Those choices are there. The CCA supply choice for the majority of the community, for everyone who is in the original default situation, does become the new default. So that supply rate negotiated by the communities becomes a new default. But anybody can opt out at any time and take advantage of one of the other two choices. As a matter of fact, when I talk about the who's affected when a program launches, or keep in mind this third-party supply group. People who have made a choice are currently in a contract. They stay in their contract. They are not automatically opted into the program. And I'll reemphasize that later. But in essence, this is just something that is replacing the original default with a new default. It does not take away choices that people have already made in terms of supply choice. So revisiting and adding a little bit more to the discussion of benefits. The benefits are enabling local selection of default supplier. So changing from a state mandated decision where the utility makes the decision about supply with no input from anybody in their territory, which is predominantly non-renewable too. But it's enabling local selection, whereby you leverage, the aggregation of communities. You have bulk buying, to use another analogy, like Costco or BJ's Wholesale. You have power and numbers to get better pricing, better rates for a fixed rate for electricity supply, which eliminates price volatility. So you know exactly what your rate will be, which has been particularly beneficial during this crazy price fluctuation that we've seen in the last several months for electricity supply. And in that win-win scenario, it accelerates transition to renewables So you can actually, and it's been shown to be true, and I'll show you the performance chart, so people can actually pay less for renewables than they would otherwise pay for predominantly non-renewable sources. And the third win, there are those numerous consumer protection elements built into the program. Very transparent, no hidden language, no fixed period that turns variable. Just a real simple clarity to what's offered to the program. So those are the benefits. So where is it happening? Lots of places. It's an accelerating opportunity. It was enabled back in 2016. And on a recent snapshot, all of these dots show the communities around New York State. And these are the New York State borders that I'm tracing. It's not completely clear here. But more than 150 communities have passed the local laws to explore and potentially launch a CCA program. And there are more than 60 communities that are in active CCA programs, including 16 down here in the Hudson Valley, of which I'm part of. And there's actually some more that some other administrators are working with. The ones that Jewel, with my support as program organizer, are part of are the Hudson Valley Community Power Partnership, which is in Central Hudson Territory, which is currently 10 communities. And then there's another partnership called the Rockland Community Power Partnership, which is currently 6 communities that are in Rockland County, in our territory. And so those are the 2 aggregations of which I'll show you how the programs are doing. So the one I'm showing first is the Rockland Community Power Program, which is the partnership of these 6 communities who all chose Jewel to be the administrator, and my organization is the program organizer. And these communities launched a program in November of 2020. And when we launched the program, we had the 100% renewable from New York State sources fixed rate at about 7.2 cents per kilowatt hour. And we also offered, because the communities were interested in a second program rate that was not 100% renewable, but just as a slightly less expensive rate option that somebody could take advantage of if they chose to. That's what we call a standard fixed rate, and that's the purple line at the bottom, which was about 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So these 2 flat lines down at the bottom, the green one, the 100% renewable for the program, and the purple one, the standard, which is a mix of sourcing similar to what Orange and Rockland obtains on a month-to-month basis, are shown down here. And fantastically, they are down near the bottom, which means with this being cents per kilowatt hour, this axis being the cents per kilowatt hour, in the different months here, they are doing quite well compared to the other options. The other options being, the red line is an average that I calculated early on in this program back in 2020 for that second choice on the menu, for a comparable 100% renewable product that an individual customer could expect to obtain. So at the time I did this calculation, it was about 9 cents per kilowatt hour that an individual going into a third-party contract could expect to pay. And so doing an apples to apples comparison of 100% renewable fixed rate options, you can see that there's about a 2-cent benefit that the aggregation, leverage of bulk buying delivers to the community members by being part of the community program. The bouncy lines, the fluctuating lines, are both associated with Orange and Rockland. The yellow line is the rate from month to month for, again, predominantly non-renewable sourcing that Orange and Rockland chose for their communities on the open marketplace for their customers. And you can see that coincidentally, it was right at about the same of our standard fixed rate right at the beginning. The blue line is the running average of the yellow line. So you can see the yellow line and the blue line were right at the same exact point when we started the program, when I started measuring for comparison the Orange and Rockland rate. And then, but as the Orange and Rockland rate goes up and down, you can follow the average trend of the Orange and Rockland rate by following the blue line. And the beautiful story shown by this blue line is that it continued, except for this dip down here in January, it continued to climb and climb until by April of 2021, the average utility rate was at our 100% renewable rate. And after that, it kept climbing because of the fluctuations and what the rates were for the utility. So the blue line, the average of the utility, kept climbing well above our 100% renewable rates. And as of April of 2022, it is well above, over 8 cents compared to our about 72 cents for our 100% renewable, showing that it does work and the win-win scenario is bearing out. And so this is a 2-year contract and the communities are considering renewing, but this rate, these two flatline rates are in effect all the way through October of 2022, at which point communities can renew, which 9 of our Hudson Valley Community Power communities did. So what I'm showing here is for these communities, the same exact color coding, same exact idea in the graph for the 3-year contract that these communities entered into, which started in July of 2021. And the lines are very close here in the chart because of the craziness that happened with Central Hudson's rate in February of this year, when it jumped all the way up to 22 cents per kilowatt hour. But even before that craziness happened, just jumping to the end of the story in the previous slide, you can see the blue line, the running average, stayed above our program rate right from the start and continued to climb. And so the blue line above our program rate, for the duration of this contract, and things are looking like, it's going to be quite good. It's even climbed above the private market rate that I'd calculated, which is closer to 10 cents in our territory when I did this calculation. So the program does work in terms of the win-win scenario of competitive rate for electricity supply for 100% renewable sources versus the utility rate. So that's just showing how it's been going. So who is affected when a program is offered? And what decisions might need to be made. When a program launches in a community, it's available to everybody in that community. Anybody can take advantage of it. A large part of the community, those who are in choice number 1 on my menu analogy, are automatically included. And they're enrolled on an opt-out basis. It's a new default. They have to say if they don't want to be part of it. People who are not included automatically are those folks who are in choice 2 on the menu, customers who already have a contract with a third-party electricity supplier. They stay in that contract. If they want to take advantage of our program, and it's not prohibitive cost-wise to jump out of that contract, or if it ends, they can jump into our program at any time. Customers that are larger than the rate classes that are automatically included, large commercial customers that have demand accounts, they're not automatically included either. So for example, there probably are multiple meters on a school building, school systems buildings, and if some of them are very large, thousands of kilowatt hours per month, they have what's called a demand meter, which sometimes comes with typically comes with an advantageous rate because they're paying this demand charge, a standing demand charge. Because of that reason, they're not automatically included. But again, they can join if they want to. And many customers have been jumping into our program who are not automatically included in the commercial class because our rates are so good compared to what's been happening with Central Hudson. The third bullet is customers who have placed a freeze or a block on their account. That's something where, and it happened particularly because customers may have had a bad experience in the past, or maybe some customers, looking forward, just don't want to be included in our program. They can contact Central Hudson and say, please put a block on my account, which means they would, Central Hudson would not share their information with our selected supplier. And that's where it starts. Central Hudson is the arbiter of knowing who is included and who's not included because they have all the information. The last exception to being automatically included are folks who are on the Home Energy Assistance Payment Program, the bill subsidy program for utilities. Because it's not a guaranteed savings, because of that fluctuation compared to our fixed rate flat line, they're not automatically included, but again, they can join if they want to. So except for those exceptions, everyone's automatically included and has to say if they don't want to be part of it. And customers can opt out and opt back in, and opt out and opt back in at any time if they want to during the duration of the contract that is established by the municipality. So if the program makes sense to launch, municipality will be looking at this in a couple of months' time, through that request for proposals, a competitive bid. But if it launches and there's a fixed rate obtained that's offered to the community, folks will be advised through a letter that gets sent to every eligible customer, which we call the welcome or opt-out letter. abbreviated, not here, but the WOO letter, WOO. It will be sent to everyone that we anticipate in late summer of this year, late summer 2022. There is a 30-day opt-out period, which is not at all the only time you can opt out, but it's a 30-day period that's mandated by the state just for folks who want to stay in the original default situation and never be included. So there's a requirement of a minimum of 30 days that people can just leave things as they are if they want. And they have to only do one of several actions to do that, either calling us, sending in a prepaid mailer that comes with that letter, using the website to use a form to opt out, seeing us in person and transferring their information to us, that they've received, with the dummy account number. Any one action is sufficient to not be included. But for those who stay in the program, they'll stay with the default supply established by the municipality, which we very much encourage to be the 100% renewable rate, if there's more than one rate offered. And then those who stay in, we anticipate that by this fall, October, November, it will actually be the transition from the 3-line item situation to a 1-line item situation on their bill. So it actually goes on their bill in about fall of 2022 with the indication of who the supplier is. And there will be more outreach too, if that happens. More of these public meetings will happen in addition to the letter sent by the municipality. And it is a letter from the municipality with a seal of the municipality sending that letter. So doesn't look like junk mail. And there will also be a letter from Central Hudson for those who stay in the program. So there's lots of notice about how this happens. So now I'm at the end. I've got 3 slides of frequently asked questions to kind of be redundant, revisit some of the things I've said, but also to maybe emphasize some things I may not have emphasized sufficiently. So the first couple of questions. The first question, does this program replace my utility company? And remembering the bill, how the delivery charges section never changes. No, it does not displace the utility company. Everything stays the same in terms of the basic service that the delivery company offers. Second question, does this impact the reliability of my electricity? It does not. This is a way that people that are staying in the program can have a financial arrangement enabled by the municipality by which they exclusively pay for renewables from New York State sources. But people are not exclusively attached to those renewable sources. They are attached to the New York State grid, which is overseen by the New York State independent system operator and Central Hudson to ensure reliability. So there is no physical change in terms of wiring to people's houses. And so all of the reliability overseen by Central Hudson is unaffected. So there's no difference in that regard. Will the program save me money? It can, but it's not guaranteed. We anticipate it will, but again, there will be months that the utility rate will be below the program rate. So it's not guaranteed. What if I want to change my supply choice? Well, with that menu, as I showed you, people can change their supply choice at any time to opt out of the program and take advantage of one of the 2 other options that are always available to utility customers. Or if a second rate is offered within the program, they can switch to the other rate at any time too, just by contacting us or using the web form that's the program website for themselves. And there's never a fee, never a penalty. There's no funny business with this program to make any of those changes. Last slide. Do I have to stay in the program for the entire duration, entire contract? Nope. You can opt out at any time and opt back in at any time. And again, no fees or penalties. Can I participate if I have my own solar panels or if I participate in community solar? And as I tried to emphasize by showing that 3rd section of the Central Hudson bill where the solar benefits are shown, that is a separate decision. It is an additional option. So it does not interfere. It is not a conflict with this supply program. So the answer is yes. Even if you have solar on your home or you have a subscription to a community solar project, you can do the community choice aggregation program. The last question I have, what happens after the program ends? It's typically a multi-year contract. The original Hudson Valley Community Power Program was a 2-year contract for a fixed rate. The Rockland Community Power Program is a 2-year contract still. The new Hudson Valley Community Power contract is a 3-year contract. So those are the durations in which we have those fixed rates. And this question often comes, I think, from people who've experienced private contracts where they've had fixed rates, and it can turn variable, or they want to know, is this program after the fixed rate period going to turn variable? It's simple. This is a fixed rate for the fixed period of time. If the program ends, if the municipalities don't renew and go into a new contract, everyone automatically goes back to the original default, where Central Hudson's making the decision. It does not turn crazy or variable. If the community decides to renew, as we did with 9 of the communities in the Hudson Valley Community Power Program, there is a seamless transition from the initial or the previous fixed rate to the new fixed rate. So it's just an automatic transition with all the opting out available to them and all the communication to them as well. So again, a very simple, straightforward program in that regard. If you don't have questions now, but you think of them later, here is contact information by which you can reach out and ask questions. Here's our program helpline phone number, 859-9099. And any extension will get to us, but extension 2 is for us, just to let us know that you're in Central Hudson territory when you're calling. You can send an email to info@hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com. And you can read a lot of good information on that website as well, hudsonvalleycommunitypower.com. That's the partnership page and lots of detailed FAQs and other information about the program. So that is it. I thank you so much for your patience as I went through this presentation. I'll stop to see, I don't see any questions in the chat window. I see the third person that we had with us has left. So are there any questions that anyone has? All right. Well, again, please do reach out to us at the information here if you have follow-up questions. But for now, I'll say thank you so much and leave you now to go enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening. And thank you again for being here. Have a good night, everybody.